Oh,
that's my bad, sorry about that, turn it off.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Killam School Building Committee meeting to order. Tonight, we will have a moment for public comment. We will have Killam School Building Committee liaison reports. We will talk about upcoming school tours. Then we will move into a very exciting designer report covering tasks completed, the traffic study, existing conditions assessment report, traffic and site community meeting recap, next steps after that. Then we'll get an update on a call with the Mass School Building Association. We will, I don't think we have any warrants or invoices to vote on this evening. Okay, so we won't be addressing that agenda item tonight. And then we will approve prior meeting minutes and talk about future agenda items. So do we have anybody in the room who might like to make a public comment?
We have to call to order first?
What?
Do we have to vote on calling to order? No, perfect, good, sorry.
Okay, anybody online? Okay, I have a couple things for a liaison report. Does anybody else? Okay, I'll keep this brief because I'm pretty excited about the presentation. Okay, I just wanted to let the full committee know that Jenny set up a meeting with National Grid. So we did have a meeting with them, letting them know we have this project's coming and we've been long-standing customers and we would love all the help we can get with any of their rebate programs. And so we are on this list. And so if for you building committee members, so is the senior center, the senior community center project. So they have them at least on a list of MLP projects that would like our help. I did issue, let's see, I don't know if the superintendent isn't on, but he has scheduled time with the, at the Pleasant Street Center for May. I believe it might be May 20th, don't quote me, but I've invited Senator Lewis to join us then. That would be, I believe it is May 20th. It would be an afternoon session. I believe it's 4 to 5. Those are usually really great turnout. And so, that'd be great for him to get an update on the project as well. We'll see if we can make it. And then today, Matt and I met with the RMLG General Manager, Greg Phipps, to give him an update on the project and new information that we now understand about what a potential district-wide pre-K solution might look like. And encouraged him to, I see Tom online, thanked him for all their participation so far, and they're still very committed to helping us make this the best project it can be. Okay, so school tours, do we have an update?
I do have some updates,
Okay,
sorry, I'm
That's okay.
having some computer problems, I can't log into my computer, so I'm trying to pull it up off of my phone here. So we did reach out to Watertown to talk to them about the Cuniff and the Hosmer schools, and just so everybody understands, the Cuniff school I think is probably more in line with our school as far as enrollment and in size, but the Hosmer school actually has a pre-K element, which is something we're considering. So we were thinking that both would be good options to review. They're both new schools, they're both net zero schools with solar on site and everything. So it's not just net zero ready, they actually went the full way, went to net zero energy, not net zero cost, but net zero energy. So we did try and reach out with them, out to them. Based off of the poll we had done, it seemed like Mondays and Wednesdays were the best days for the committee. When they came back to me, they said, how about Tuesdays and Thursdays instead of Mondays and Wednesdays? And I said, that's fine, we're gonna kind of defer to your schedule. They asked us a little bit about what is our goal for these meetings. So I talked to them a little bit about that we want the committee to be able to see it. We're very interested in net zero. We're very interested in kind of lessons learned. What do you like? What don't you like? What would you have done differently if you could do it over again now? Things like that. I had suggested maybe starting at Cuniff, I said we'd like to do both of them in one day, starting at Cuniff first, and then maybe going from there to the Hosmer. And we said we certainly want facilities people available, whether it's janitorial staff or facilities directors, things like that, again, whatever they're willing to give us, but somebody who could talk to the technical aspects of the building. And so that's where we're at. They did come back and asked us if we could do a Friday, April 12th. I've actually already got training that I'm actually training somebody, so I can't miss it on that day. So we're trying to see maybe the week before April vacation. If not, maybe the week after April vacation. They did pose the question if we could try and do it over the vacation. But I think with the people that we want from their side being there, and maybe with people on vacation and stuff like that, it was probably better off to kind of stay away from that time period, if that makes sense, if that's what everybody wants to do. So that's kind of where we're at with them right now. I wanted to bring that information to everybody here to make sure that even though I think Monday, Wednesday was the better date for everybody, if it's a Tuesday or Thursday, I think it seemed like mornings were more difficult for people. It's more early afternoon, early evening would be better. So like maybe when the kids are getting out of school, or maybe maybe the first school is while kids are in school. The second would be when the students are out, that type of thing. So that's kind of where we're at. If that makes sense for everybody, if I can keep pushing to see if Monday and Wednesday will work.
I mean, I'll make myself available. I
Same.
appreciate the heads up,
Yeah.
because I think that's probably more important for a lot of people to be able to move things around, including yourself.
Yeah.
But I know the superintendent made comments that he would really love it if, there were people in the building. I think he preferred non-school vacation week.
I think so as well. I think the other thing to keep in mind is I think the polls and everything has been focused on this group because we want to make sure everybody here was available. But again, I would pose it to the superintendent and to Lindsay and to the teachers that we had before that, whoever went to the other visits, if they could go here, it's just seeing, even if they only made it to one or the other of those schools, just to see one more option out there, because I think it really is, it's different when you see schools that have been made over the last 3 to 5, 6 years compared to a school even 10 years ago. It's a lot different. In a school like ours that's quite a bit older than that, it's a lot different. So I think, go ahead, Lee.
Mike, can you just get like 2 or 3 dates and show it to them and see what happens?
I think that's the next step. I just wanted to make
Okay.
sure that this was happening kind of back and forth at the end of the week last week. And I reached out to Carla and kind of said, hey, we wanted Tuesday, Thursday, we wanted Monday, Wednesday, they seem to think Tuesday, Thursday. She said, well, let's bring it to the group because we were having a meeting if this meeting was a couple more weeks, I probably would have done it by email last week. But where we were meeting as a group, we just thought we'd try and get in and see what everybody's thoughts were.
I agree with Leah. Just what if they have kind of a few of them, then we just
Okay.
and I think probably at least for me, the more lead time, so if it's out a few weeks, then that's easier.
Absolutely.
It's easier to juggle, but I can definitely. I think I was one of the ones that gave you the least amount of options, so apologies ahead of time. But yeah, so if there's anything that comes out of there, I'm like, I can.
Right. So maybe after the vacation is a little bit better for everybody anyway. I was trying to push to have it sooner than later because I know they're doing their designs and you want to kind of relate what you're seeing to what the designs are happening and things like that. But a week or two probably isn't going to make much.
So that's a great question. Does that cause a lot of, like if we did it the week after vacation, so the end of April, does that put huge wrinkles into things or no?
We don't care.
Okay.
We're gonna go to this thing because I'm excited to see the building. We're excited to see the building, but we just want to learn and we want it to work for you. This is all about you.
And then Lindsay has also reached out to Acton Boxborough, and she and I were getting back and forth, and I think what she said is they're wondering what was best for us. So I think it's probably the similar kind of process. I'll send her the email that I sent to Watertown and say this is what I sent as a kickoff point, and I think we'll probably stick with Monday, Wednesday with them if that seemed to be what worked for everybody. Try and get a couple of dates, whether they're Mondays and Wednesdays or Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever. Probably stay away from the weekends and Fridays, but we'll try and get a couple dates. And I think we were thinking Watertown, the 2 schools on one day. Acton would probably be a different day, just because commute-wise and whatnot.
Yeah, I can't wait.
That sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Jenny, Lee, you're up, I think.
Is it okay if I sit over here?
Yeah.
Dawn, is that okay?
Sorry.
We only require a small deposit, please. It might be refundable, it might not be.
It might not be small either, we got big
Exactly,
school
yeah,
bills.
this is a big school.
I do wanna say one thing before we have a lot of information to look at today. I'd like your expectations to be, hey, we're gonna look at a summary of existing conditions, but we're gonna put the report online, you can study it at Ike, so it's really just kind of giving you an overview. It doesn't have to become a big deal, because we're just trying to layer information for you. And the second, even bigger thing is having Rebecca here to talk about traffic is a very important subject to also review. Some of you already saw it, but I just wanted to let you know we have a lot to do.
And try to move through it with good speed. Okay, so a recap of what we have been doing since we last met. Traffic study is completed and Rebecca's gonna be sharing that with you today. We had the first traffic community meeting on March 18th, and that was really a listening session. Tell us all about your traffic problems, and boy, do people wanna tell us about their traffic problems. It felt very cathartic. I think it was good. And we have a follow-up community meeting scheduled for April 1st, where we're gonna be presenting some site development proposals, which you'll see today. And then I will share my summary of the existing conditions assessment with you shortly. We're working on preliminary alternatives, that's like planning the building, where spaces are gonna go. We'll be presenting that to you on April 8th. The ED program is in progress. Tom, the superintendent, is leading, I saw you don't know, Tom is leading that effort, and it's moving along. And the geotechnical investigation is scheduled for mid-April. I just talked to him and he's like, more like early May. So final report expected still, I guess, toward the end of May. Here is our ongoing schedule. And want to highlight this cost estimate here is coming up. That's a major kind of milestone for us because we have to kind of put everything together so it can get cost estimated. That'll start during April vacation. Okay, so the existing conditions assessment, we looked at all of these disciplines. So environmental, civil, structural, building systems, that's mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems. Building envelope, that's the walls and the roof. The interiors, code compliance, hazardous materials inside the building, and geotechnical, which is pending. And what we did, we looked at a lot of existing documents. We did site visits, we did questionnaires, and also a lot of discussion with the facilities department. Different members of the team also reviewed records with from the health department, the fire department, and utility companies. We did database searches of various state and federal sources, and sampling and testing of potentially hazardous materials. Starting with the easiest one, which is environmental, because basically there's no problems here. So one of the things we look at with environmental is what was the prior use of the land. So prior to its use as Killam, it was undeveloped land. We looked for any evidence, either visible odors, there was some testing of the air, any evidence of contamination, dumping, hazardous materials. Kind of the only interesting thing that came up was there was an underground storage tank, but we tracked down all the records. It was for oil before it was shifted over to natural gas. Our consultant tracked down all the records for that, and it appeared to be all properly disposed of, and there were no reported spills. So basically, based on what we've found, we believe there's no environmental mitigation required.
I'll warn, of course, that when we go in there and do the actual physical testing, that anything can happen.
Okay.
But I thought I'd say that.
Yeah, what we haven't done is tested soil.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
So when they go
Alright, so I
underground
should
and they
temper
dig,
my
they might find
excitement.
something, or they might find debris,
Sure.
whatever it is, we don't know that.
Yeah.
And we will.
We commonly find lead and asbestos in a number of our sites, from old
Could be.
paint or God knows what else.
On the stormwater and sanitary, this diagram kind of shows you like where the stormwater runs to on the site. A couple of things to point out, there's a crushed pipe right here that's supposed to drain to a pipe to the storm main in Haverhill Street. So that doesn't appear to be draining properly, so there's a low point here at the northeast corner of the site that's we've also observed is kind of soggy. That's the reason. And we've also heard reports that there's water overflowing from the Killam property to the neighbors to the north, which are at a lower elevation. Most of the water management is through just on grade, on surface runoff. So as part of this project, we'll be required to do a whole new stormwater management system that will retain or detain, I always get the wrong word.
Or maintain.
Detain, John, help me out. We just wanna hold the water on the site and let it drain out slowly.
Detention.
Thank you.
Okay.
Or retention.
Like when you have to stay after school, then you get
Detention.
to.
I don't know if it's
Detention is
retain or
if it's a
detain.
school and retention if it's not a school, because detention is good with schools, you understand?
Keep that in mind.
That's old school.
Okay, enough of that.
We do think, so we don't know much about the condition of the underground sanitary piping, other than it's transite, which is an asbestos material, but as long as it's not disturbed, it's generally not a problem. But we do recommend, kind of full investigation of that underground system by scoping, because a system of this age can have damage, and we wanna just know that. And for the time being, we would recommend assuming just replacement of the whole sanitary piping system underground. And if it's a new school, it'll all be new anyway. I'm just gonna keep going through, and if you have questions, stop me. On the site regulatory side, we determined the site is not in the 100-year floodplain, there's no wetlands, no protected wildlife habitat, so those are all good things. We don't have to go through those special regulatory reviews. And one thing that did come up is there's a parking requirement of 1 parking spot per staff person and 1 per 7 children, for a total of 200. If we go with the larger scheme of the 690 students, it's a total of 211 spots required on site.
I would go in on this one and say it's really up to your town. I mean, that's a lot on a small site, that's a lot of pavement. And when we work through it and decide what's actually the actual right number, I'm sure that we would work with planning and everybody to come up with what everybody feels is the right number.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And
Is
then
that-
that seemed like a large number to me, even looking at your rough.
That's where the regulations usually start, but again, I have found it's more of a negotiation usually.
Right, so
Whose regulation is this?
it's this
Town
zoning.
town
It's
zoning,
not
so it would just be
Yeah.
an appeal to the zoning board of appeals if we wanted to have fewer than that number of parking
Do you know
spots.
how many we have now? By any chance? No
I
pressure.
don't know, do you know?
Not as many as you
I
think.
wanna say
No, it
Probably
doesn't
not
seem
that
like
many,
there's
not
that
that
many.
many.
80?
Yeah, something like that,
Is
usually.
there, they're parking on the streets, we know there's,
Yeah.
we'll find out
Right.
later.
So this is assuming a lot of things.
Yeah, cause I think the parking you have now, actually, I think it is about right, cause the parking you have now is enough for basically all the staff and a couple of visitors, right? And no parents. So that's about, it's like 70, there's 75 or staff or so right now, so that's probably about the right number.
So that'll
I would
be,
think
the
that.
truth will be determined.
Yeah, the potential pitfall with that is that towns are often reluctant to give variances to themselves because it sets a bad precedent. Because if a developer says, you gave a variance for reducing parking at Killam, I want the same variance for reducing parking on my condo project. So, there's often a kind of an inbuilt reluctance to bend the rules.
I don't know if it's a variance.
Yeah, not that it's a variance either, it could be just through community planning, that
Well,
plan.
if it's a zoning requirement, it has to be a variance, right? If it's in the zoning bylaws, let's put it that way. That's why I asked where this rule came from. Is it in the zoning bylaws, do you know?
I believe it's in the zoning bylaws, I do. Verify.
Then it's either a variance or a special permit.
Yeah, I think that we'll go through the process and that we will show that you probably can't even fit that many cars on site.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Well, that's why we have a traffic engineer.
But that'll be
Definitely talk about
an issue that we'll continue
Yeah,
to
okay.
talk about. The reviews we will be going through are site plan review, with the town, potentially the zoning board of appeals, we'll need a stormwater management permit. That'll happen at the same time as site plan review, and then there'll be some EPA permitting that has to happen during construction, and the contractor is responsible for those. So the structural system, the structure is typically, it's concrete filled hollow structural steel columns that are with CMU basically infilling in between the walls. So, and then we have these, I don't know how much I need to go into this level of detail. It's basically a steel structure is all I need to say about that.
Does that mean that there's a high recyclable aspect of, when I see those steel beams, I'm like, okay, great, those aren't going in the landfill.
Sure, yeah, steel is recycled.
Is that type 2 construction?
It is not type 2 construction,
It's a one-story building,
so it's
so it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
It's basically could be 5B.
So there's a couple of structural issues where there's some settling in this lower right-hand picture in the this picture in the lower right-hand corner, some settling of the foundation. There's some differential movement between one wing and another wing of the building that's caused some cracking. The more substantial issue is that this building was built before seismic codes. So depending on the amount of area that's renovated and altered, we may be required to bring it up to full seismic compliance with the codes, which basically means rebuilding all of the brick wall, all the masonry walls, because they're unreinforced and they have to be reinforced.
So that's the entire building, right? Or no?
All the walls, yeah, so
Yeah,
you could
I mean,
probably leave the
70%,
structure.
This is
80%?
basically a bunch of columns with these CMU walls butting right up against them. I will point out, those of you who know construction, that all the columns are actually facing the outside air. Like there's a veneer with an airspace, but those columns this is how they used to build. We would never build it that way now. It has, may I say, it has no insulation
No insulation.
on the wall, so it is not built the way we would build it today.
So moving on to plumbing and fire protection. Fire protection, we know the building doesn't have sprinklers and it would be required to have sprinklers, so that would be added in the renovation scenario. Also, the primary problem, there's some smaller problems with plumbing, but the primary problem is that there's lead in the water. And the source of that contamination is not known. So it could be any number of things. It could be from the city water mains, it could be from underground water service, it could be from solder. So if we would recommend, also because of the age of the system, just a total replacement of the plumbing system. Mechanical system also has reached the end of its expected life. So in a renovation scenario, we would recommend full replacement of the mechanical system. Same with the electrical system and fire alarm.
Well, one of the concepts I want to bring up really quickly is the idea that we're not just talking about patching something up. We're comparing taking this this old building, which is there for a reason, and bringing it up to at least, say, 50 years of life, of additional life, which, to compare it to a new building, which is 75 maybe. And so we're not just saying, you know what I mean? So we're not talking about patch and repair. All of our cost estimates will be trying to make an apples to apples comparison, because otherwise you're actually not going to get much value for these. I hope that's fair.
On the building envelope, it's, as Lee said, there is an airspace between the exterior brick and the backup CMU block with, according to drawings, I mean, we haven't actually investigated to see what's there. According to the drawings, there's an airspace, damp proofing and flashing, but there's no insulation. Generally, the walls were in good condition, but there is this one area along the north facade where there's a lot of efflorescence and a lot of grout missing, and that's, we think, could be due to the airspace being blocked up behind the wall so that water is weeping out through the brick instead. So that would require more investigation, but in any case, we would recommend assuming a full reclad, basically removing all of the brick and replacing it with either new brick or a different material.
So, and this is, I'm not a construction person, but those concrete pillars that we're looking at, those have to all be individually replaced. That's not how you build buildings now, and it's not up to code.
Those concrete pillars aren't the structure.
They're not structured,
Right,
they're
they're not
decorative.
structural.
In a way, those things are decorative. The steel is inside. Well, you don't see it here.
Oh, okay.
But what I will say is, and again, those of you and if Pat Tompkins was here or somebody like that, when we open up a wall like that, in our experience, it is usually bad. And the reason why is because it wasn't flashed right, it's been a long time. There's actually a steel column and plate exposed to all that water and all of that, which could be rusting. If water is actually pushing through it means it's not weeping properly. And we can't put insulation in the Northeast on the inside face of all of that, because that would cause, if we wanted to insulate and just put it on the inside, that would cause condensation inside the walls in the block. That's kind of how it usually works. We would have to put it on the outside of that, and the only way to do that is to rip off all the brick. So there's a lot of Mike, you know all this stuff. I'm just telling you, what we usually find in a wall like that is scary.
Yeah, and typically what you would see in new construction is maybe a combination of interior and exterior insulation. What you're trying to do, what Lee was mentioning, is there's a dew point, and that you want that dew point to be outside of your system, not inside of your system. And that's really the trick. And the other trick to that is, even if you were able to figure out how to do the insulation on the inside, is as that insulation returns to each window and each door and each roof connection, like, sometimes that dew point gets pulled in right at that edge there, and then you have wood framing, say, around a window, and the dew point is sitting right on the wood and rotting the wood. So there's a lot of discussions there. Jenny was mentioning earlier, like, we may have to replace the masonry walls depending on the amount of renovation. I'll tell you right now, you're going to be replacing all the walls or doing some sort of reinforcing. I've seen where you can do metal clips to the top of a wall sometimes, but if the wall isn't fully reinforced, that might not be an option. So ultimately, we do have to do a renovation option. We do have to do a renovation addition option and a new option. So it's important to understand this, and we have to go through that process. But it sounds like what I'm hearing right now is that renovation option is going to be pretty expensive. But again, we'll see where we are when the estimates come in a few weeks.
Because did I mishear, so if those decorative exterior concrete columns are not holding the building up, did I also hear you say, you called it by another term, that the structural components of the building also need to be shored, brought up to code, whatever?
On the inside, yes.
No.
On the
If-
inside?
If it's
They do not. The structure is in a good shape. We did permanent building committee did a survey of this building, and the building structure is in great shape.
The issue, I think,
That doesn't mean to say that we don't have to
Yeah.
do major renovations.
Right,
It's a gut renovation. no
the
question.
issue is that if, depending on the level of alterations, the building doesn't meet current seismic codes.
Correct.
With the masonry, the brick and the CMU block is not reinforced and it's not anchored correctly.
Okay, so I think that's
You-
really what I was getting at, so I hear what you're saying, what's in place is working. It might
Yeah,
not
the
work
steel
if we have
structure-
seismic activity.
Yes, to upgrade it to current seismic, you would need to anchor the walls, interior and exterior, to the roof and the floor, but they're already anchored to the floor, but anchored to the roof. You don't necessarily have to put steel reinforcement in the walls. That's not a requirement for a single-story building. These are things which are, these are details. There's no question it's a gut renovation if we
Thank you.
Couple other envelope components, the windows are just completely, windows and doors are a complete wreck and absolutely need to be replaced. The roof is okay, but given the level of renovation that we're talking about, we would probably recommend replacing it so that we can get the proper insulation and flashing and, like Lee said, get you a building that's ready to last another 50 years. Interiors, we need a gut renovation.
One of the things about having all that CMU everywhere, it sounds great. Of course, the kids, that was one of the things that they pointed to and said, we don't like all these blocks. They hurt a lot when I get pushed against the wall. Which is very wise of them.
Concrete masonry.
They're all just blocks.
Thank you, what's the U for?
Unit.
Unit.
Thank
Unit.
you.
Okay,
Yeah.
CMU.
Thank you.
So, but I do want to say is that actually when you're putting in all new systems, it's not very forgiving because you have to drill through everything, cut it, patch it, because it's all block, and that just makes for a lot more cutting and sawing and all that.
Thank you. On code requirements, there's no issues with egress compliance. That means the number and width of exits. And the accessibility issues are relatively minor for a building of this vintage because it's only a single story, so you can actually access all the spaces except for the stage, which would need a lift. But toilet rooms need to be made accessible, door hardware need to be made accessible, all these things. But that will all happen in a gut renovation. On hazardous materials, there is asbestos present in the building, which we know, all buildings of this vintage basically have asbestos-containing material. And that just needs to be disposed of properly in any renovation or demolition. Also, in spaces that will be the preschool, there will need to be lead mitigation. And yeah, that just needs to happen. There was no,
Surprised it wasn't the whole school.
the rest of the school only needs to be, the lead regulations are only OSHA regulations that have to do with the safety of workers during the construction.
If I can just pipe in here on the asbestos, just for the record, many buildings of this vintage have it. If it's not being disturbed, it's not a safety issue or anything like that. When we're talking like insulation on pipes and stuff, many of those pipes are buried in walls and buried in ceilings and stuff, so I don't want people worried that they heard that there's asbestos in the building. It does not mean it's unsafe. It's once you start disturbing those areas and going into those areas, we would need proper abatement, and that will absolutely be done, but it's not a danger as it sits right now.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I just support that. There is no asbestos problem with the building as it stands right now. So
It's all contained.
It's once you start moving.
as long as it's not disturbed, asbestos is perfectly fine. It's,
Yes.
Yes.
There was no mold or radon detected or very low levels below regulatory thresholds, and same with PCBs. Then on the program, so this is interesting, right? If I have here the kind of program summaries of your existing, you have about 60,500 gross square feet. That's with the portable classrooms or the temporary classrooms, whatever you call them. Option 1 with just a partial rise program would be 103,000, call it, and option 2 with the 12 rise classrooms would be 123,000 square feet. So we need to add somewhere between 40 and 60,000 square feet. So the biggest problem that this creates is on the site. If we leave the whole existing school and then we build an additional 40 to 60,000 square feet, there's not going to be any space for a field, and there would be very limited, it would be very tight to get enough parking and drop off and play spaces without a field.
We'll be looking at those kinds of diagrams, starting with traffic and all of
Yeah.
that. But we wanted to give you a preview that the renovation of the existing building, or even half of the existing building, if we decide, is going to be predicated a lot on what actually can fit on the site which is a necessarily larger building that has the program that the MSBA requires, and also the program that your special education and everything requires. It does not have right now. Jenny's document there, just for a second, every single classroom is undersized per the minimum requirements of the MSBA. That doesn't mean that they're really far off. The gym and a couple places like that are really bad, like really far off. There's certain spaces that are not even close and would have to be just rebuilt. But we don't want to alarm you with that, but those numbers are really good to start to see, because that's what we're going to be talking about the next few years.
So now, in that scenario, then, if we were staying on site, it would have to, if you're using the same footprint, then you'd have to go up.
Well,
I
you
mean,
have an
is that-
existing building that and we asked structural, is not designed to carry a second floor, pre-existing, obviously. The old, so you wouldn't, and if you want to leave the existing building there while you build a new one in order to save hundreds of more thousands of dollars worth of temporary conditions, you can't take it down and then build a new one. There's no place to put the kids for 2 years. So there's a phasing issue with that. And if we want to be typically efficient about it and save you as much money for the building as we can, that'll also be part of your decision. It's a huge part of it.
Perfect.
Just in general in that, the fewer phases we can do, the more bang for your buck, the more money you get. And the other part of it is the fewer phases, the shorter the duration of the project. If we start doing multiple phases and say build half the building, the new building, and move some of the students or all the students in, and then it starts expanding that schedule. And when we've been talking schedule and cost and things of that nature up to now, we've always kind of prefaced that this is assuming a new construction, just for the sake of discussion, because if it was a renovation, there's so many variables that we couldn't give you a real schedule. So just something to keep in mind as well.
Thanks, Mike, that's appreciated. Thanks, Lee. Thank you.
Can we check, is there anybody online in the building committee members have a question?
On the Zoom you're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
do any of the building committee members online have a question? No need to ignore you.
I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any chats pop up.
Thanks.
I can keep an eye on it though.
Thanks.
Okay, so in summary, your existing building is undersized. The building systems are at the end of their life. The building envelope does not meet seismic or energy efficiency requirements. The interiors are at the end of their life. And we have this site space issue that we just talked about. So given these factors, our recommendations are that in a renovation option, we would look at only retaining the classroom wing. So, and then tearing down the kind of front part of the building, which has the cafeteria and the gym and the administrative offices. That'll allow us to still keep everyone in the building during construction. We'll be able to build a bigger addition, and then you'll still be able to have some space on site for a small field.
And
So-
that's focused on just the renovation thing.
Right, and in that renovation option, we would recommend basically a gut renovation, as we've been talking about, with all new interiors, exteriors, and building systems. Any questions? Oh, I do see a couple chats here. No questions, thanks, looks good, okay.
Cool. We want to get to the traffic thing if we can.
That's the end of my
So
existing.
we promised, this is a draft, it can be modified, we don't have geotech yet, and and we will be posting it soon enough. Once we've washed over it one time, you could study it more in detail. Fair enough?
No, this is excellent. Jen, this is awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. This is
Yeah,
really, really
great.
good. This is very interesting to hear. I think it confirms a lot of things, but so it's good to see it in print.
And I'll turn it over to Rebecca to talk about traffic.
Alright.
For those of you who don't know, Rebecca and her company did the traffic study at Swampscott, which was very intense in their neighborhood, and that and you
We
guys
also did Acton, Foxborough.
oh
that
Acton
you're
and other
about to
places, and they
And-
work very
and
well with
Foster.
communities, which you saw. Take it away, Rebecca.
So I know a lot of you saw the presentation already last week at the community meeting, so I'm gonna give just kind of a brief summary of some of that existing condition stuff and talk about what we heard from people at that meeting, and then I will go forward talking about the next round. There we go. All right, so for the things that I wanna discuss with you tonight are just kind of covering the study area that we looked at in our traffic study, talk about the existing conditions in terms of what we saw for the morning and afternoon observations that we did at the existing school, kind of the surrounding roadway network around and what we sort of saw there, some collision history at the surrounding area intersections, and then also talk a little bit about the traffic counts and the speed studies that were collected. And then I'll touch base on the public outreach findings that we've heard so far, and then walk you through some preliminary recommendations that take into account all of this existing conditions review that we've done and the comments that we got from the public. I don't know if, yep, this will work on here, perfect. So the study area that we looked at obviously included the area that's right immediately surrounding the site here. And for that area, we're really looking at things like the on-site circulation, the parking, the accessibility for kids that are walking to school or parents that are walking their children into school. And for the outer area, whoops, oh, there goes that. I'll do what Jenny was doing. Do the mouse pad, that lasted very long. Yeah, so for the outer area here where we're looking at these little dots that you see, these are the intersections where we actually did some traffic counts to see how many vehicles are passing through, how many pedestrians are crossing at each of these crosswalks, also collecting bicycle information for how many kids are biking, although the counts that we did were in February, so not a lot of bikers at that time.
Just the hardy ones.
Yeah, just the real hardy ones that day, but in fact, the day that we were doing the observations, it was about 10 degrees outside that day, so we didn't even see that many walkers aside from, from their car to the building. But we did get a good handle on some of the accessibility issues at some of these crossings and where there are crosswalks located, where there are crossing guards at those crosswalks or other equipment provided.
By the way, members of the school committee and other town people were at the community meeting, and they asked me about using or how to utilize your services or understand the areas around in the whole neighborhood that really are deficient, and how to bring all that up since our focus is on the site itself.
Yeah, so we did identify a number of deficiencies that we'll walk through in the surrounding area, many of them that can be addressed right now before the school were to even be constructed. And so some of the questions we got is what can we do to make this happen now? So we'll show a few things that we can do to make those things happen now. So for the existing school, obviously there's a elementary school with roughly 420 students that are enrolled now, and then 2 pre-K classrooms with 30 kids in those classrooms. And you can see from the map here that shows you the school district boundaries that this is really a neighborhood school that we're talking about. So kids are coming from not very far away. There's a lot of opportunity for walking and biking on those nicer weather days than what we saw. But it really is more of a neighborhood type of school. So the data collection efforts that we've done to date, as I kind of touched on a little bit, were really multifaceted, so we went out and did actual observations, boots on the ground, looking at, you know, what is the actual traffic patterns here, how are people getting to school, what's going on around here. And then we also went out and did roadway inventories once all the traffic was cleared and looked at the actual conditions of the roads, the accessibility of the sidewalks and pedestrian crossings. We looked at the collision history to see, are there any significant crash patterns that we're noticing in the surrounding area that might indicate a safety issue. And then we also did traffic counts and speed counts, which would help us to really assess where is there heavy traffic volumes, where are there high speeds, where we want to keep those kids away from, and which roadways are better suited for having access and egress. So some of the things that we saw in the morning during our morning observations, and just to kind of fill you in a little bit on how the morning works versus the afternoon. So in the morning, there is this little driveway here that comes onto the site where parents are allowed to actually pull up and drop off at the front door. But as you can see here from the blue and the green lines, that represents during the peak time how far back the queues actually go. And that's a little bit more than 6 minutes that you're waiting in line back from the Wakefield Street intersection up until you can actually turn onto the school property to drop your kids off. So there are a lot of parents that you can see from these little black dots that are actually parking in the neighborhood as well and then walking in so that they can avoid waiting in that long line.
My understanding is that every one of those dots actually represents a car.
It does.
The way you guys drew it.
Yes, so at the peak time, if you were to actually count all these little dots, you would see that there are 92 vehicles that are either in queue or parked on the roadways during that peak time.
And it's not that bad. I mean, considering it's the morning, and the morning always flows really quickly. It's the afternoon that's always the crazy.
Yeah.
You know,
We can improve.
when I did the mornings, it wasn't that fun.
No, it's not fun, and they've saw a lot of situations.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, this was a 10-degree day, so there were a lot of people driving their kids to school that day. So this is really, I think, representing a worst case scenario of what happens on those poor weather days when people are driving their kids in. And then another thing that we see happening is up here out along Haverhill Street, there's roughly 10 parking spaces. There's a little pull out there for those 10 vehicles to park. So parents are also parking in this area and they're walking their kids down in. And then there was also a handful of parents that were over here in the church parking lot that walk through the woods, although on that cold weather day, not so much because of the snow, but there are some parents that will actually do that walk through in this area as well. And some of the things that we saw during those observations, as was mentioned, so right here in front of the school, you can see with all the parked vehicles on the corners and this being a neighborhood school where people are walking, that there was a high number of pedestrian crossings in this area. And the crosswalk is located, if you were to come out of the school and take a right-hand turn, that crosswalk is located right between Dana Road and the school driveway. So all of these parents are kind of looking to their left to see oncoming traffic, and then they pull out and there's immediately a crosswalk there. The other thing that we saw is that there's definitely some training needed for the crossing guards as they're stopping traffic pretty much constantly to allow people to cross the roadway. And even when they see someone coming from further away, they're stopping traffic. So it's holding up traffic quite a bit, where if they were holding the kids at the edge of the roadway, waiting till a few of them collect and then crossing them, the traffic might flow a little bit more efficiently in that area. There's also a very wide turning radii there, which gives the cars coming out of the school the ability to whip out a lot faster as well. And then the location of that crosswalk too does create some sightline issues for the vehicles that are coming out of Dana Road, and I'll show you a picture of that in a little bit. Oops, I keep hitting the wrong button to advance it. So this is coming down here to the entrance as you're turning into the school. You can see that the parked cars and the queued cars block access for the sidewalk here for the pedestrians that are walking into the school. that creates really a safety issue for those pedestrians as well.
One neighbor talked about, right here where you're pointing, no, the
Oh.
next one,
Next one here.
how the cars pull up, they're actually parking on the sidewalk, and their kids are trying to use the sidewalk, and sometimes they open the door, the kid walks into the door. One neighbor said
They
that.
also mentioned people with strollers can't get by
Yeah.
when the doors are open.
That's a.
So yeah, you can see in this picture, there's a car that's there. There is actually, although it looks like snow here, there is actually a grass buffer there between the sidewalk and the pavement. That grass buffer is pretty heavily sloped, and you can kind of tell by the angle of this car in the picture. But the cars will pull right up over the grass and onto the sidewalk there. So good job presenting my slightly. And then also during the peak of the morning arrival, you can see that the queues are coming all the way back here down towards the Wakefield Street intersection. So that's a pretty extensive queue there that we're seeing in the morning. Up on Haverhill Street here, where that's a high-speed arterial roadway in that area, you can see the weaving pattern that happens with cars weaving out in and out of those parking spaces. Those vehicles are also blocking the sight line for pedestrians. You really can't even see it here, but there's actually a pedestrian standing right there waiting to cross the roadway. And that's definitely a big problem. And you'll see in one of the future slides that people are not slowing down in that school zone at all either. So in the afternoon is a very, very different pattern. So in the afternoon, only the buses are allowed onto the site here, and the parents have to park in the neighborhood and then walk to the school to pick up their kids. So we see a lot more traffic that is parking in the neighborhood and extending way down Dana Road, all the way down Charles Street, back towards Wakefield Street, up Boswell Road, and then beyond that parking, that designated parking area on Haverhill Street as well. And at the peak time, we saw approximately 115 vehicles that were parked on the streets in the surrounding neighborhood. And you'll see some of the reasons why that is a big problem here. So you can see here from these pictures that there are vehicles parked on both sides of the roadway. Charles Street is very narrow, so when you have the vehicles parked on both sides, it really only leaves you one travel lane to get through up the middle. So cars are kind of taking turns getting past each other, which, yeah, if there were to be an emergency during that time, an emergency vehicle would not be able to get through. Particularly also on Dana Road and Boswell Road, where those are even more narrow than Charles Street. You can see here, there's just barely one lane that you can get through.
The big thing to know about schools is that I've learned from you is in the morning people flow through and they show up pretty much on time, but in the afternoon they'll show up 45 minutes early and park and just start idling. So it's a very different situation in the afternoon.
Yep. Yeah, in these pictures here, you can see some of those sightline issues. So this one on the top, that's right over here at the corner of Dana Road, where that crosswalk is that goes right up to the school. Coming out of Dana Road, all those cars that are parked down there, they can't see at all of those kids that are crossing the roadway there. And then coming over to Boswell Road here, those cars are all parking right up to the intersection, despite the fact that there are no parking signs there. They're all parking right up through the intersection in those very wide radii that are provided, and you can not see these small kids crossing the roadway around those parked vehicles. Oh, I think yeah. Same thing over up here on Haverhill Street, where those parked vehicles are blocking the sight lines of the kids. The other thing that we see over on Haverhill Street is the cars extending beyond that parking area where they start jutting out into the roadway, and more of that weaving pattern that's happening as parents are coming in and out of those parking spaces there. And then this one is also showing you those vehicles that are parked up onto the sidewalk here, which now in the afternoon, rather than just being right in front of the school, is coming all the way down to Wakefield Street, parking like that up on the sidewalk, making it very difficult for kids to walk to school. So some of the things that we see in the surrounding area are very similar problems in terms of accessibility to what we see right in front of the front door. Where out on Haverhill Street, there are several crosswalks crossing Haverhill Street, some of which are mid-block crossings. Due to the kind of curvature of Haverhill Street, a lot of those have poor sight lines, so you can't really see them as you're coming around the curves. They do all have static signage, so they have just the standard pedestrian sign at the crossing itself, but no advance warning that there is a pedestrian crossing coming. No dynamic signage that would alert you to when there is actually a pedestrian coming or crossing the roadway in those areas. There's also some rather long crosswalks just because of the alignment of some of these intersections, particularly at Charles Street and Haverhill Street, where this crosswalk here is quite long. Many of the crosswalks either do not meet ADA guidelines. Most all of them are missing the detectable warning strips, but many of them also the slopes don't meet it. And in some cases, there are no ramps at all, in which case those are a tripping hazard for younger pedestrians like we have here, and also an accessibility issue for parents walking with strollers and everything trying to get onto those. Moving up Haverhill Street closer to the school, we see those same type of issues where the crosswalk right in front of the school is faded. There's poor sight lines due to the parking of vehicles on the street, as well as kind of this curvature of the roadway that you see as you're coming around the corner. You can't see the pedestrians coming from the school side of the street. Down at the next intersection here, there are poor ramps at that intersection. And then a lot of these issues here we've kind of already touched on, but just noting kind of crossing guard locations here where there is a crossing guard. You can see here that wide radii on the Dana Road intersection too, similar to up at Charles Street. And what makes this one even particularly more dangerous is that cars park all the way right up to the crosswalk in this area. And you can see the narrowness of the roads where the on-street parking creates an issue. And then coming down here to the Charles Street and Wakefield Street intersection. So this intersection, you can kind of see as you're looking at it from overhead, appears very much like a four-way intersection. And as you're driving through, it feels like it should be because of the design of the crosswalks here. But it is only a two-way, so only Wakefield Street approaches actually are required to stop. And Nicole Rogers from our office actually experienced a near miss at that intersection where someone coming on Wakefield Street wasn't aware that they needed to stop, and she almost got into an accident as she was on Charles Street. And we do see from the collision pattern a number of crashes that are occurring there.
You never want your traffic consultant getting in an accident.
Yeah, that would definitely be bad.
Always to reveal it.
Very
Yeah.
ominous.
So the ramps there again are not ADA compliant as well, so there's some improvements that could be done to that location to bring that up into compliance and just make it a little bit safer there. So from the crash history here, you can see that we looked at the crashes at all of the study area intersections from 2018 to 2022. So we're kind of collecting that pre-COVID and during COVID time to see what the crash patterns looked like. And there were two high crash locations that popped up in the study area. Not very surprising at all which two those were. So the Wakefield Street at Charles Street, where a high number of angle type collisions were occurring at that location, consistent with people not understanding the traffic control there. And then this section here, right along Charles Street from Haverhill Street, down in front of the school to Boswell Road, where there were a high number of crashes there. 60% of the crashes were with parked vehicles, so that definitely shows that the parking on the street is an issue there, and 50% of the crashes there happened on school days during the morning arrival and dismissal periods. So clear indication that that is an issue that we need to address as we're moving forward. And just taking a look at the speed counts that were done, so we collected speeds on Charles Street right in front of the school and over on Haverhill Street right in front of the school. Both of those are marked for school zones that bring the speeds down to 20 miles per hour during the day. And what we saw on Haverhill Street is that although this is posted for 35 miles per hour, the speeds here are actually closer to 39 to 42 miles per hour, which isn't unreasonable for an arterial roadway midday. But what is particularly alarming is that when the school zone flashers are activated, the speeds are still 37 to 40 miles per hour, and that's really, really high
I
for,
was just gonna ask whether
for
those signs are
kids.
still flashing.
yeah,
They
so,
are, and it's not helping. That's bad.
yeah, it's definitely not a good situation. So with those travel speeds and the high volumes on Haverhill Street, we wouldn't recommend having the main access be over on that side of the building. We would recommend it be on the low speed, low volume side on Charles Street instead, and that we upgrade those pedestrian crossings and implement some traffic calming measures that are appropriate to an arterial roadway to try and bring down those speeds in that area.
Speed bump, like elevated.
Speed bumps are actually not allowed on an arterial roadway, so typically what you would do is more like creating bump outs into the roadway, so it actually narrows the roadway a little bit, and it brings the pedestrian out beyond the parked vehicles that are on the side to a place where they're visible, and then installing the RRFBs or rapid rectangular flashing beacons so that people see that there are pedestrians in there. And actually, we have a few of those things indicated, so I can show you when we get to that slide, but
So one thing, I don't know if you saw this from your observations, so a little bit north on Haverhill Street, there's Franklin Street.
Yep.
What we find in our community, which is a very narrow road, there are 18-wheel tractor trailers coming down Route 28, taking this ridiculous turn on Franklin where they shouldn't be doing it. It just is very dangerous. And then when they get to Haverhill, there's enough of a curve that they can get on, so they are coming down Haverhill as well. So I don't know if Waze would send them in a different direction if you, I can't even blame Waze because it's been happening for many
Yeah.
years. They shouldn't, they're avoiding 93 and cutting to get to 128, but there is 18-mile traffic going down Haverhill Street.
I'm not surprised. I've definitely had Waze tell me to cut through Haverhill Street before when there's
Yeah, I shouldn't blame them
crashes
because,
and stuff
you
going
know,
on,
but it's
yeah.
just,
You know, from the very first day, we met with teachers and others and had them do kind of ideas. They told us, stay away from Haverhill, focus on this, do not have an exit on Haverhill, Haverhill's dangerous. And now we're just confirming that through observation, you guys already knew this, now I see it. It's a kind of it's a tough road.
It's a fast road, yeah.
It's fast.
Are raised sidewalks, raised crossings allowed, or are they considered speed bumps?
They are not, yeah, so
Yeah.
any type of raised device isn't allowed on an arterial roadway. Yeah. I should say it's not allowed, strongly discouraged. And you wouldn't really want it anyway with the type of volume that is going through there. It would be a nuisance at nighttime with all of the noise
Sure.
of
Yeah.
vehicles going over. It might definitely deter some of the trucks from
Would,
trying it though.
So possibly a flashing light that actually stops you and lets kids cross. Because remember, this is during certain times. It's a little bit in the morning and in the afternoon people go. It's not the greatest inconvenience to have some, a pedestrian walkway there that makes people stop for certain little times if that's what you want. Or if that's allowed on a highway.
Yes, yeah, that would be
It's no
allowed.
different than being behind a school bus, frankly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, like, you, when you're there at that time, that's what you expect to be. Rebecca, just, you may hit this, and just kind of a quick question, maybe I'm going ahead, so you can stop me, but like, when you talk about like a future state for, Killam, would one of the areas where you could address this is giving the school more room to, like, so that the what's it, egress? So like right now, in the circular drive, there's room for 7 cars. Could you queue it where it's a much longer, and so that would
Yep.
ease what's on Wakefield, and then in the afternoons, there's like a special area for buses and.
that is all the things we're just about to get into.
Sorry about that.
No, you have good timing. It's a great segue into all of that.
Sorry, I didn't even know, I should have looked ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so just to kind of summarize real quick the existing conditions, obviously we saw the parked cars on the roadway are an issue. They're encroaching into the sidewalk, they're encroaching into the travel way. They're restricting sight lines for the pedestrians at the crossings. And there are some accessibility issues as well at a lot of the crossings. Kind of off-site queuing obviously in the morning is an issue with the drop-off time period, and then the parents that are all, they're blocking the traffic from getting through as well. And then the speeds and the volume on Haverhill Street were kind of the big issues that we saw. So with the future school,
Can we just, before you get away from existing conditions,
yeah,
these are gonna be the same for the next few years until we build a new school, if we build a new school.
they are.
Do you have any specific recommendations that the town should be addressing?
We do, yes. So as I go through what our recommendations are for the school in the long term, many of those are things that can be done short term as
Short term.
well. Yes, yep.
That's terrific.
And
so you'll see
not
some of
only
those
that,
things.
with the town, but the principal and their team already was talking to you about, hey, what can we do right now just do differently? So they're all over it.
Yeah.
They can.
Perfect.
I have some asks when we get to that slide, it's coming up, things that I could use some help with.
The principal has
Perfect.
spoken.
We knew she was there somewhere.
Yeah, and we can attest to the fact that we did that in Swampscott too on that one. So we went out and did all of our observations at the Stanley School and nearby middle school, and we saw a number of things that they could do right from day one, even just with where they're stopping kids, to have them cross the road, and they actually implemented a lot of those and is working a lot better at the middle school now, and we'll see how things work with when the elementary school opens. But yes, so for the future condition, what we're trying to accommodate here for the K through 5 enrollment is 455 students. So that's an increase of 35 kids, not a huge number in terms of traffic for the morning arrival and afternoon dismissal for the K through 5 levels. But when we're talking about the pre-K, where we're increasing between 60 and 180 kids coming to the new preschool, that's could be an additional 150 parents that we're talking about that are all going to want to be parked or stopping as close to the building as possible, because these are very young kids. And they're kids that don't exit the car in 2 minutes or 30 seconds. They're kids that have, the parent has to get out, they have to unbuckle them, they're moving slow.
What I do know is that they'll bring them to the front door, but after that they have to stop. They're not allowed to walk them into the building, even with rides. But it's still an issue.
And the other thing to think about is that will become really a district-wide school. So it's no longer gonna be a neighborhood pre-K. You'll have kids coming from all over town. So the majority of them will be coming in their cars and not much walking. So some of the things that we heard from the public were that there's really a desire to address the safety and the speeds and the sidewalks out here, where the cars are parking on the sidewalks. It makes it a lot harder for people to walk. They're not accessible, so if someone is pushing a stroller or walking with their young kids, it can be very difficult. There's also a need to balance the needs of the school and the neighborhood. So some of the things that we heard from the neighbors, although they weren't opposed to having people park in front of their homes, they didn't love that their driveways were getting blocked and they couldn't get out.
Really? You like that?
They also obviously had safety concerns about the fact that cars are parked on both sides of the roadway and emergency vehicles and themselves, they can't get through.
Neighbors can
during
be
those
so
times.
picky, they can be so demanding.
A very positive thing they said that we'd heard is that there is a tradition at the school of parents, not as much in the morning, but in the afternoon, talking, getting together, socializing, the kids too. They don't want to lose all that sense of community. So whatever we do might be a hybrid where there's still parking, but we lessen it, we create different choices.
Yep.
was the kind of thing that was discussed.
Yeah, so that's exactly the last bullet that you see here, is that they really wanted to maintain that sense of community that they have, particularly where you're talking about pre-K up through 5th grade. These are kids who are really just beginning to meet their lifelong friends, and it's important that the parents meet and that they create those relationships with the other parents. So that was something that we wanted to keep. In some cases, we will look at having a rolling pickup in the afternoon. In this case, that wasn't what the neighborhood wanted. They would prefer to have the cars parking and picking up their kids in the afternoon. So some of the goals that we had, obviously, improve the pedestrian visibility and safety, accessibility, all of those things. We want to alleviate some of that off-site parking and queuing that's happening, get as many vehicles as we can back onto the site, and then look at improving the access, looking at which roads are kind of better suited for access, and what kind of access and circulation flows we can make work well. And then developing a strategy that can work well for both the pre-K and for the K through 5. And obviously we want that solution to work well for the neighbors as well as the school. So this is just kind of highlighting the 4 areas that we were kind of looking at and considering alternatives for the school. Obviously pedestrian safety and accessibility, we were looking for options that kind of minimize conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles, and also provide convenient connections between the street network and the school, as well as to the play areas on the school grounds. Parking, we were looking at how much parking we can actually accommodate and kind of the layout of that and how that works well with the site, both in terms of staff parking and parent parking. And then how much queuing we would be able to get onto the site so that we could alleviate some of that off-site queuing, and then also trying to optimize the layout so that we can get as much play space as possible.
So I want to make a point here. Ready? These are not designs. And the reason I say it like that is because what we want to do is focus really on the traffic patterns and things like that. But there are some revealing things here, like the amount of, or lack of amount of play space that's left over when you have one story and stuff like that. I just wanted you to know that, this isn't a fully flushed, because our site design will be everything connected, not just traffic and parking. It's got to do a lot of things. So we really want to focus on flow, queuing, and parking, and that's what I want to say.
So these first options are options that show what could happen if we were to maintain the existing building here.
Half the existing.
Half the existing building, correct.
So if you look at the middle one, you can really see it. We would take, no matter
you can see
what,
right
I
here
think we
where
have to
the
take
part of
down
the existing
in the future that front one where everything's deficient anyway. And we're trying in this scheme to keep the classroom wing 1 story.
So yeah, in order to keep the school open, obviously, the addition would have to go at the back on the Haverhill Street side, and then remove the front side of the building. But that actually works well from a traffic perspective anyway, because we do not want to have the heaviest access point be over on Haverhill Street. Although that can be used for buses or service entrance where there's not as much traffic, having that be the parent access point or even the staff access point is not really desirable. So these are all showing kind of options of how we could lay things out on the site if we were to have an addition at the back of the building.
Keep in mind that existing building there is only about 28,000 square feet or something, because it's 1 story and half of it's gone, which means we still have to build, in one case, 90,000 square feet. That big block in the back there is a big block, and it's going to be a couple stories regardless, and we've been doing some little layouts.
Yeah.
So what we're showing here is not absurd for footprint. Go ahead.
All right, so in this first option here that we're looking at, this is one where we've created kind of a continuous one-way loop for vehicles to be able to pull in the morning and drop off right at the front door. And in the afternoon, this could become a parking area so that parents could pull in along the edge and park their car to walk in and get their student. And then off to the side here on the northerly side of the building would be a staff parking lot. And then at the rear of the building, we would have the bus entrance so that buses would pull in here and drop off kids. And that does create the need for two access points into the building, two main access points into the building. Because with this option, we would have a service area on the side of the building that potentially kids could walk around to the front, but it wouldn't be really a desirable area to have kids walking through. And then some additional parking along here that could be used for staff or visitors. And some of the things that we saw as kind of downfalls to this is pedestrian accommodation. You know, with all these different access points, there's multiple points where the traffic is conflicting with pedestrians. The play space is all located on the inside of the loop, so the kids are gonna have to walk across the access, keep moving that one forward, to be able to get to the play space. And then in terms of on-site parking, we can only accommodate 110 vehicles on the site while still maintaining enough play space for kids to actually be able to use it.
And I will say that we will never do one where you have to cross the street light and you know, where it's unsafe for the kids who are there all day long. That's why we start with the worst and go to the better. And that play space right there, or that green, is not adequate for the number of kids at all, not even close.
And this one here does allow us to get 25 parent vehicles onto the site in the morning as compared to the 12 or 14 or so that are able to get onto the site currently in the morning. So that does help to alleviate some of the queuing that's happening out on the road to accommodate that additional 35 kids. And then in the PM, we could get 30 vehicles parked on the site, which doesn't quite touch the 115 that we saw in the afternoon, but it does help to alleviate some of that. And then this is another option kind of showing if we were to have kind of a loop that would come down along the side of the building and then back out here. So in this option, we're still getting 110 on-site parking spaces for the staff. In this case, we can get 30 vehicles onto the site in the morning, so a little bit more, and 40 vehicles parked in the afternoon along the edge of the roadway. The main issues that we see with this one is the pedestrian conflict. So for anybody who's walking into the school, they've got to cross here, both entering and exiting traffic, or down in this location here to get to the front of the school. But the benefit that this one does have over the other one is that the play space is connected directly to the building so that they don't have to cross the traffic there. And for the queuing, obviously with 30 vehicles, we will still have some queuing back out onto the roadway. And then this is kind of a third option that we had here that's sort of a hybrid of the other two. It creates a loop here right in front of the school where people could drop off and then come back out through the same access point. And this one, it provides connection between the play space and the building so that pedestrians don't have to cross the traffic there. But they are still crossing, somewhere in this area. There is that pedestrian conflict at the driveway here. And still with this one, we can only get 20 vehicles on the site. So this is the lowest number for on-site drop-off queues. And then in the afternoon, we can accommodate 40 because we still have this long exiting area here that we can get 40 vehicles to be able to park in the afternoon. But from all of these perspectives, when you see the addition added to the existing building, you can see we're definitely very limited on the amount of play space, and it's really limited just to the front of the building in this area. So the next ones that we looked at were, what if we were to do a new building, and what options would that give us for traffic flow? And we kind of took the same approach. We know that Charles Street is where we want to have the access be located, so we looked at what would happen if we were to create kind of this long sweeping loop around the entire site. What would happen if we had an access that just kind of came up to the side of the building and back down? And then what if we had sort of a hybrid that allowed us to loop into the front so that we could get more vehicles stacking on the site, both in the morning and afternoon, and what would that look like for play space and for parking?
And an essential component here is to always try to separate the buses from the cars in some way, because we didn't talk about that, but it's a major problem. You only have 3 buses and it's already a major problem. It's scary sometimes, and they shouldn't be parking at the front door with all the cars and mixing that. It's a very dangerous situation.
What percentage of kids come with us relative to?
I
I'm
don't
trying to think
remember
of the numbers,
percentage right
'cause
offhand.
There's only 3 buses. One of the buses comes through and is the Boston bus that goes to all the different, so it's just a few kids. Somebody online, like Lindsay probably knows.
So by a great majority.
You say how many come by bus?
Yes,
Yeah.
relative to how many come by car.
It really has been variable, but there's at least 120 that might come by bus. And then in the afternoon, there's 4 buses because the YMCA also picks
Okay.
up students.
What are the barriers to getting that number up in terms of busing? In other words, what determines those numbers?
Well, a large percentage of students who are on our bus are not actually in the Killam district. They're students who need transportation to be able to access school. So that changes a little bit of where we're picking up the number of
But
students.
is that a town imposed number? In other words, is it, do the kids not use the bus because the town won't allow them to use the bus, or what?
No, anyone can use it. We only have 2 designated routes right now, and there is a fee for other families if they want to use it.
Yeah.
Just drive.
And they're fairly close, most of them. All right, so this is the first one?
Yes, so this is the first one. So this one, very similar to what we saw with the other layout, with the pedestrian conflicts here, where all of the pedestrians are having to cross through to get to the play space. Although this does open up the opportunity to have a playground over on the side of the building, where we can have the service area on the opposite side of the building. And these could be flip-flopped, we're just showing it in these particular areas. But we could have a service entrance on one side, play area on the other side, and then a larger parking lot here that would allow us to accommodate 120 parking spaces in this, which would essentially get us enough for the staff to park, which is what we were kind of aiming at. We can make that larger, but then we're obviously compromising some of the play space if we want to do that. But we will show you a couple options for how the parking could be laid out.
And obviously a
if we wanna
parking lot like
increase
that, while it's wider with more, stuff, it's a loop parking, so you go in, you go around, you see all the spaces and go back out. Much better than a long dead end thing.
Right.
Cause you don't want people going out Haverhill.
And with all the other options, we would have that kind of long dead end. For the queuing here in the morning, we can get 30 vehicles on the site, so a little bit better than the options with the addition. And then in the afternoon, 40 vehicles on the site parked as well. And then this one, we get a much larger play space, but obviously it's disconnected from the building because of the way the pickup and drop off is oriented. So in this one, we get the largest play space possible.
I think we got our first green.
It is our first green,
Check.
yes. So we
Check
get
mark.
a pretty good size for the play space, same size for the on-site parking, 120, so it's enough for the staff, but parents obviously would have to park around the loop here. We'd be able to fit 40 additional parent vehicles around that loop in the afternoon, and then in the morning time, we could stack 30. And again, in this one, we've shown the bus occurring through the back. There are some other options for where that can occur, and we will show you those in a minute.
What is this?
Oops, did I skip one?
You went backwards?
Knowing a lot of schools like this with this alternative parking area, and I was just wondering how other districts are managing those other,
What do you mean alternative parking area?
I don't mean to say, the bus loading and the staff parking. Parents are very creative, and there is a school across the street as well, so what I have seen in some of our schools, we build all these egresses and then we chain them and no one ever uses them, and I don't know what they were thinking. But I can't think of any school in our community that does anything like this, and I was really just wondering about
Anything
people
like
management
about
after school.
what? I don't know.
How other districts keep, so it says staff parking, so how do you enforce that? How do you
Oh.
let the buses in and out of there and keep the parents out?
Yep.
Well, the
So
buses.
you would definitely sign it as buses only, and you could put buses only between the hours of whatever, so that, you know, you still have access to the parking midday for visitors to be able to pull in there. But you would also have crossing guards located at these driveways to get people across, and the crossing guards can definitely deter
And the
people from.
the bus doesn't have, that loop in the front or on Haverhill, I'm not a big fan of it anyway. But the idea of having an emergency access there, one anyway, might work well. So we'll keep on chipping away at that. I hadn't seen these, so go ahead and.
Yeah, so this is just showing a few options for how we could lay the parking out a little bit differently, to, you know, kind of change the play space and the bus loading area. So in this one, it's showing that we could have bus loading that's occurring down on the side. And the buses could continue out, although it's showing a connection that
No, I
shouldn't be
agree with
there,
that,
but the buses would be able to then continue out and egress out onto Charles Street.
So in a way, maybe the buses just come in, it's a tiny little drive that says buses only, they go in and they park and they wait, and then they can scoot out, scoot straight.
Yep.
So they don't even have to turn around. Things like that are very clever.
So it does create another conflict point here with the parents and the busing that obviously needs to be controlled,
You
but
never showed a
it can
design where it came and
work.
turned.
That's on the next one.
Thank you.
Yep.
I was wondering what happened.
It's there,
Okay,
but
so you
these
wanted
do
to
give
see-
you the
yeah.
option to get some more green space on the backside of the building out on
I feel pretty
Maple Street.
strongly, just in diagram, when you look at that, see that green up by the road there? That is, that strip, that is 50, 60 feet of valuable play space for little kids. There's a berm from the street up there, we can put a fence, it's safe, you know. Any areas that we can get along the side or next to the building is contiguous, safe play space on a tight site. Right?
Why would you not move the building towards Haverhill Street and put the play space on the?
Right, there's a certain distance we can move the building towards Haverhill. Right.
20 feet from Haverhill?
It's a front, do we know the setback? When I was standing on the.
Probably 20, I think.
Yeah, so it has to do with the scale too. So if I have a 3-story building and I put it 20 feet away, it's gonna feel like a monster. If I have a 2-story building, you know what I mean, so
Yeah.
there's kind of a proportionality to it. When I was standing there and trying to visualize it, the brick building that's off to the right, which is, it's a 3-story building, but not our 3 stories, it's more like our 2 stories. That is set back quite a bit. But the White House right there, the farmhouse on the left side on the top by Haverhill, that's right on the street.
Mm.
And so, and then there's a lot of grade going on in that back corner. So I think that I can imagine the building's gonna be a solid 40 feet away from the road or so to feel okay. But I'm guessing, I'm going by intuition.
Question, have you talked to the fire
Yeah.
department at all and
Good question.
any kind of, cause I know they are really big on making sure they can get around the
All the way
building.
around the building.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have not yet spoken with the fire department. In all of these options, there are kind of creative ways that we can provide access for a fire truck though, because fortunately the site is relatively flat. So you can see that we have, you know, kind of a thin sort of beige line in here. That could be widened out, and that could be made pavers or something like that that is traversable by a fire truck so that it really appears like a pedestrian walkway, but a fire truck can get onto it if there was an emergency. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and when we get more into the actual design of the building, we will look at things like that. These are really just kind of schematic to figure out, you know, what's a good traffic flow.
I do know
Yeah.
from the library experience, it was a huge component
Yeah.
as to how that parking lot got designed and
Yeah.
where the building ended up and where the addition ended up, so good to kind of check in with
They
you
like to get
sooner
their
than
And
trucks.
later.
that's one of the benefits of having the bus in the back is that then the fire truck does
You
get
get in there
access
too,
to the back.
But they also like to get to the four sides of the building right up close. That's
Yeah.
they prefer that. And these ones don't allow it on one side. I mean,
Right, it would have to be-
They would not like that.
Right, we'd have to speak with them. The days, I'm going to say a couple of contradictory things. The days of putting a elementary school on a piece of pavement where it's all blacktop all around, like it is now, we try to avoid that. At least the feel of it and the safety of it and all of that. This is going to be a sprinkled building.
Right, very different.
Fully sprinkled, and it's going to be very accessible. So we'll go back and forth with the fire marshal, with the chief, and talk about strategies to that and where they actually need to get. You know, maybe they want to get to the roof. It's a different kind of building too. It's not a. It's going to be a taller, smaller footprint, and they might have different needs for that. And we will do what they need, but we'll also kind of go back and forth and see what's pragmatic and safe for the kids.
Lee, if I can, just,
Please.
we were talking about trying to have access, when Rebecca mentioned the pavers, we've actually seen like grasscrete pavers. So it's almost like a honeycomb that the grass grows up in, so it really is still a play area, but it has the ability to support a fire truck or even outriggers, things of that nature, so you can kind of keep the walkway feel, so it doesn't look like it's a 30-foot wide walkway, but it's still a walkway, but you still have the ability, in the case of an emergency, that you could drive out there and be safe.
I actually know what the requirement is. You need to be within, so basically the fire truck needs to be able to get somewhere and you need to be within 250 feet. The hose line needs to be within 250 feet to get all the way around the building. So as long as you basically have access on at least two sides, you should be fine as long as the building is not more than 250 feet.
In the end, we'll need to go and do precisely what the fire chief is comfortable with. I agree with you, but that doesn't mean that that's what they'll be comfortable with, and we're here to serve.
They have opinions.
They should. They're responsible for people's lives.
Yep, with sprinklers, that's a good feature.
Okay.
So in these alternative parking layouts, these do give you the ability, if desired, to have a connection through between the parking spaces and that parent pickup and drop off area, which could be gated at times or blocked off at times, so that when parent pickup and drop off is happening, people can't get through there, but the rest of the time they can if there's events going on at the school, things like that. Just to provide you some better circulation on the site for those types of events without having to go back out onto Charles Street. And with this, if we were to do an option that kind of had parking down the side and extending out over to the pickup and drop off area, we could get 138 parking spaces on the site, so that gives you enough for your visitors, your staff parking, and a little bit of overflow there.
By the way, there's a crazy option where you actually go in where the trucks and the buses go in at the same point. One bypasses, drives by and parks beyond the buses, or beyond the area, and you only have one place. I know, it sounds crazy. Anyway, keep going.
So our last kind of option here with the new building is having that kind of hybrid option where we have the loop that comes over in front of the building and goes back out through the same access point. Here again, you do have some conflict along here with pedestrians crossing, but they are able to walk up. Either you could bring them up outside of the staff parking and up to the front of the building, and along the outside of the pickup and drop off area to the front of the
What's
building,
good
so they
about
don't
this-
have to cross.
Yeah, what's good about this one is from whatever direction you're coming from, you can do either side of the loop. It might get pulled away a little bit. That one potential conflict in the middle of it all, that's kind of like an arbitrary conflict.
That's more the parents that may be parked on either side of the road as they're going back to their car or going
Right.
to, that are gonna be crossing over the entering and exiting traffic
And so
more
the
than anything
thing
else.
here that and you might be saying this, but the interesting thing is here, the morning is very different. The morning you come in, you get so many people in the queuing line to the front door, and then there's nobody else parked, and they just flow. And that gets a ton of people that used to be on the street onto there. And if pre-K is staggered enough, both at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, it sweeps at different, in the morning it's only like a 15-minute drop-off period, and then maybe the little kids come. So it's a really different thing. What we're trying to do, when we were working with Rebecca on this, is then have the exact same structure work in the afternoon where people come and they park and they load all the way around the outside of that loop safely, so that all of those cars, PM storage of 50, is all on site, which cleans up some of the road, blah, blah, blah. And that's the kind of thing we were starting to look at, just starting to.
Yeah, so with this option, during that afternoon time, we can get 170 vehicles total on the site, between the staff parking area and the that loop. So we're getting pretty close at that point to that 211 that Jenny mentioned that's required for zoning. And then you can still have some additional parking, out on the street, on Haverhill Street, and out on Charles Street, but potentially on one side and not both sides of the street.
The other thing I like about that, the overall loop concept, double-sided where you park, is events. So you have blah, blah, blah night, and people park all over the place, but here they actually just park on the side all the way around, and that's a lot of people for a concert or something, or a basketball game.
So similar, we've shown kind of, some alternative layouts here of what that would look like with that loop. So in this one, we could bring in the buses down the side here, have them unload in this area. And although this is shown as a connection, this could be a traversable connection that looks like a pedestrian crossing, so parents are very clear, you're not allowed to drive through there.
So that thing on the
and the
right that
buses
says
would be able
bus
to drive
loading,
out.
you're showing it as a very wide thing. It doesn't have to be like that
It does
at all.
not need to be as wide as it is
Especially if
shown
it's a
there, no.
one-way, if the buses come in one side or the other, you see buses, they'd have to come in on Haverhill at that point. It could be very thin. And on all of these, if you look at the right side of this, there is an intent, I wish it was thicker, right? That there's this walkway through the whole site on the right, through the trees, but then all the way to the other side and
Through
connecting
over
that.
to Haverhill Street.
This safe walk that goes through the whole site for everybody, which is kind of happening now, but not actually very well.
It's not safe.
But to make it to make that really the pedestrian roadway where all the bus and stuff. Okay.
It's shown here as being 8 feet wide as a minimum, so that it would be wide enough to accommodate two-way pedestrian and bicycle flow. It could be even wider than that, though, to really make it a nice space for people to walk through and have that great connection between Haverhill Street and Charles Street.
So I believe that over on the right there where you're showing those buses, that wide thing, I believe there's a way to make that a play area as well. And just have the buses be able to drive up, through and park in 20 feet at the most?
Yeah, it could definitely be used for, like your Foursquare, things like that.
Whatever it is.
Games out on pavement or hard surface.
And it's true that
where a bus could
a
drive
place
through.
like that could be hard, it could be play that is chained off or gated. Only buses are allowed in. It could even be an electric gate that only buses can activate and emergency vehicles. So we can look into that kind of stuff. You really have, I just want to stress, you have a tight site that we can do, but we're trying to find the right balance of things. And that's where the parking thing comes in, where how many parking spaces do you really need? And then you go to the town and talk it through, because as you can see, 200 and something spaces are going to basically take out, and they're going to be empty all the time. So, okay.
And this is a site where they have two, or at least, I don't know if Lindsay could tell me, I know they have at least one garden area, and we're talking about composting programs,
Oh,
like
yeah.
these other things, and then I'm wondering, does that ball field fit in the front of the school?
No, well, the way it's shown right now with that parking where it is, probably it's not the right shape. In this one, I would probably take the parking and put it all on the left and get a field in there. I mean, it's all about, it's just gonna be a geometry game.
Yeah, so if you wanted to fit like a softball sized field, like a ball
Yeah,
field like
playground
that,
is what they have now.
yeah, you would really be limited to having the parking down the side here like we showed in those first options. So you're talking closer to 115 parking spaces maximum that we'd be able to get
That's about right.
on the site, in order to get that to fit. And then it's really using up all your open space on the site. So if you wanted to have a playground or something else, you really wouldn't have the space for it. So, yeah, in these layouts, you might have some additional options if you wanted to cut down the number of parking spaces. You might be able to get, playground space on one side and a large ball field, multi-purpose ball field on the other side. The other thing would be if we are able to shift the driveway into this space, which is something that's being
So there's a high
looked at.
ground there with trees, and it's possible, if we're allowed to take down some mature trees or bring it through, we'd have to really berm that and create, because it really keeps rising on that lower right-hand corner down there. And so we're trying to play it safe there, but I feel right away that you could shave back, the way it bumps out, it could just curve a little bit and we could gain some space. So we're really gonna have to play the edges. That's like a gambling, I don't know. But we're really gonna have to play the edges, and every piece counts.
So.
Any more or?
Yep, so yeah, in this final layout over here, if we wanted to do kind of the alternative parking where potentially we could even get it connected through, you could get, somewhere around 138 to 146 parking spaces in there. So then we're getting almost up to the 200 mark with our parking in that case, so.
It's just,
getting
so
really close.
here's the,
But you do sacrifice the play space.
the argument is, we have we need 120 around for staff, right? With the pre-K. And then we need a few for visitors and stuff. And then we have this whole parking loop, which actually is a very flexible thing. The argument with the town is, well, people are still gonna park all over on the street. We're just gonna try to keep them on one side of the street. We're gonna try to clean it up, make it safer. It's gonna be a hybrid solution. We're not trying to get everybody on the lot. It's kind of impossible and not good. So we'll have lots of conversations with everybody.
And then kind of moving to the off-site, when we talk about these options of trying to get as many people as we can onto the site, obviously, as Lee said, this would be kind of a hybrid thing. So the top is showing what exists out there on Charles Street today, where you can see it's striped as one lane in each direction. There's not really a designated parking area that's provided. There are sidewalks on both sides with those grass buffers here. On the bottom, it's showing what it could look like in the future. And this maintains the same back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk out here, and holds the, I guess would be the westerly side of the pavement here, and widens out on the easterly side to basically reclaim that grass buffer on that side of the roadway, so that we can provide a dedicated 8-foot parking lane along that side of the roadway, and then widen out the sidewalk as well, so that the pedestrians who are walking on that school side have a nice wide accessible sidewalk to be able to walk on through there.
And that's a possibility for like 30 safe parking spaces.
30 safe parking spaces that are not blocking people's driveways between the school and down to the Wakefield Street intersection.
Because if you think about it, in the morning, the queuing, if we do one of those things right, the queuing is mostly off the street. And it's not in front of those, because we've done a long queue somehow, because that's how far, there was a length to that, I guess.
Yeah, so if
Okay.
you remember in the morning, we had 92 vehicles that we saw between what was on the site and what was parked in the surrounding neighborhood on that worst case day. So with this, if you were to have the 30 vehicles out here and the 40 vehicles that would be able to stack up, that's 70 of those 92 vehicles that are accommodated right there. And then with some more efficient pickup and drop off procedures, more efficient crossing of the pedestrians and things like that, we could definitely cut that down as well.
Does it sound like we're talking about the right we're trying not to be extreme here. We're trying to solve like the problems or start to talk about those problems. Does this sound like the right approach in general? Do you have any comments about
It's
all
perfect.
this?
It's perfect. You've kind of, you've got your arms around the problem and then, and we're constrained. There's constraints all, there's site constraints, there's neighborhood constraints, and you're looking at trying to mitigate it the best you can. So as someone that's traversed this and then moved to the other side of town, not because of it, but sort of. But yeah, you're addressing all the pain points that I experienced.
That's great to hear. I like that proposed scheme, really, you can do 90% of that with paint, right? Because it's just moving the center line and then painting
You
the
can,
parking
yeah,
spots.
it's really, a lot of this is paint, for moving the center line and then widening out the pavement here. And then right now, there's really no curb reveal on that sidewalk, it's just sort of that sloped grass area. So creating that curb, but there's no real need to change the elevation of the existing sidewalk because it's already up from the roadway like you would want it to be. So it's just widening out that sidewalk, putting in the curb and then widening the roadway to meet the curb on the other side, so it's really not a very expensive.
What was this
Change.
everything, or did you have more?
The
just
last thing that I was gonna mention is,
Okay.
looking over at Haverhill Street where we were talking about having some of those, traffic calming measures where we look to tighten up some of the intersections like you see here, so that it's not such a sweeping turn. Installing those RRFBs, the rapid flashing beacons at the crosswalks so that people press a button and it starts flashing to let people know that, someone is crossing the roadway. And then instead of having the static school zone signs, we would have signs that would have the your speed displayed below it so that people know how fast they're going, and it would start flashing when they're going too fast along the roadway during those school times. And then coming over further up towards Haverhill Street, again, right in front of the school where that major crossing is, having that same RRFB located there.
That seemed like the spot where if everybody's going through there, where you might actually want to almost stop traffic. When you said
That
RFP,
might be one where a hybrid beacon may be good, particularly where there's the ice arena across the street and everything, which is looking to expand and add some more.
Is there a crossing guard there in the morning?
Yes, there is a crossing guard there. So that might be one where a hybrid, so that it does actually stop traffic, so they would see no light the majority of the time, and then when the button gets activated, it would turn first to a flashing yellow, solid yellow, and then red. And then after the pedestrians go. What was that?
Probably cross to the preschool after school as well.
Is there anybody in the chat? I just wanna make sure we're not
Oh,
giving the folks online.
yeah, actually, I do see,
Okay, sorry.
there was a 4 buses, 2 vans update, and another thanks for the updates I have to drop.
4 buses, 2 vans. Are the vans for Rise?
Yeah,
Those may be accessible vans, yeah,
They
special
not-
education
Those do not
vans.
include any of the RISE vans.
okay, so will there be more buses,
Yes,
vans
definitely.
from Rise? Okay.
Probably at least 3 or 4.
You said buses?
3 or 4.
Vans.
Vans.
Vans for
Smaller.
Rise, not buses for Rise. Rise
Right.
doesn't have buses.
Right.
Lindsay, do you agree that the real key here is the working with the traffic consultant to understand if we're gonna do the larger Rise pre-K up to 12 classrooms, which is up to 180 students. The key here is how the schedule works. We're trying to understand with Rise and with you how that all swings so that to me, it seems to work if things clear out before Rise shows up, and Rise can clear out before the other people show up, or something like that. Does that any
I
of that
think-
make? Go ahead.
I think that that's exactly it. I'm not concerned about preschool clogging up the arrival or dismissal. If we bump it even 5-10 minutes, like slightly alter the schedule, we could definitely get both in. Like right now, it's 10, 15 minutes different, and I know it's a lot less kids, but it's functional. It's really just moving it a small bit of time.
Make it, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so 10 minutes in the afternoon wouldn't be far enough apart for
No.
them because 10 minutes, the preschool kids are not even likely to all be in their cars by the time you'd start releasing the other kids. So you want it far enough apart that they can be in their car off-site before the next round of parents are
Yeah,
coming
so
in.
morning is a
Morning
lot
is okay
easier.
to be closer,
But afternoon is where I'm concerned too, just intuitively,
yeah.
the idea that people are showing up early to pick up the K through 5 kids, and they're already taking the spaces where the pre-K might come in and want to do it. It's a little bit messy there, I'm not sure what to do.
Yeah, so I would say a minimum 20-minute separation, but closer to 30 minutes is probably more
In the
reasonable in the afternoon, given how parents are behaving now and how early, because they're arriving 45 minutes ahead of time. I think I froze this.
A lot of information.
So this is recorded, so if people
Very
wanna
good.
look at it on
They gave
RCTV
a lot.
and when? I guess that's good enough. I guess I'm just like, getting the word out there, but I think that's probably, we can link that to the project website. And so we got what you presented us now, and then just things crystallized and changed.
I believe one of the reasons you guys hired us is because we've worked on tight sites like at Swampscott, which every square inch of it is programmed. And it had twice as many kids. And kind of crazier neighborhoods, believe it or not. Like,
Okay, that's good to
jiggy-joggy,
hear.
really, it's a spaghetti place, because they have a lot of ledge and rock on the ocean. And I believe that we're gonna use everything we've learned and go over it with you and see if we come up with the best balance.
I'm hoping when you go see Hosmer and Acton Boxborough schools that you'll see traffic flowing at those. Those
Did
are
you work
both,
on those?
those are both ones that we worked on, yep. So
Oh.
Nicole was responsible for the Acton Boxborough and myself for the Hosmer schools, so hopefully you see things working well there, and that'll give you some more confidence in what we're proposing here.
It's fantastic. It's so exciting
Thank
to
you,
have
very good.
visuals.
Yeah, thank you.
We learned a lot.
Thanks for picking.
Very much. Thank you.
Just if I can maybe ask a quick question or
Yeah.
just a comment. So I think we said tonight that there's a possibility of starting to enact some of these now, potentially some of them later. In the big picture, with the MSBA process payment wise, site is capped and we're gonna be spending all of the site capped money just within the site proper. So we can always go outside the site and do different items, but it's all gonna be town or district money at that point anyway. So if there's opportunity to do some of it now or do it under separate projects, it's something to consider. I'm not saying you have to do it one way or the other, but if we can start to do some of this, I know there's different, is it safe routes for schools?
Streets, yeah.
Safe route for schools that you might be able to get some grants specific to like the crossing, the flashing crosswalks and redoing crosswalks and stuff like that. So it's something that we might wanna think about short term, what can we do that will benefit both today and when the new build, when the new project is complete.
I take it speed cameras are not allowed, right? Is that in the United
Speed
States?
cameras,
Yeah. Because
like
they're-
sending people a ticket, you mean?
Yeah, because they're incredibly effective.
Not.
Having driven in
Wish
countries
there were
with
red
those
light
speed
cameras
cameras, they
too.
really slow traffic down, yes.
Yeah, no, you can use the radar with the indication that people are
Yeah,
going too
but
fast.
sending you a ticket is
Not yet.
really good.
Matt and Karen, I was hoping maybe we can follow up later this week. If we could, I think we should set up a meeting with Reading Police, at least to start, because they also manage the crossing guards, and that's a huge piece of it. I would love help, just kind of someone else to partner with to have, because I have already spoken with them quite a few times about some of these things. And even like a couple simple cones for some of those parking spots. I went and looked after the presentation last week and we only have like 2 very small traffic cones, nothing bigger.
Who do you need for support? Somebody from the town, maybe the town manager?
Just take care
You
of
don't wanna get
that,
involved.
yeah.
Yeah, we can set that up. We can set
I'm kinda calling out, but that's what you get when you get a job.
Sure, you get more than that too. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
But I think that the principal would need support,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, this is good ammunition.
Keep it fresh. You don't want those parents ever knowing. You don't want anyone to know where, you have to be good everywhere. They could be there this day, they could be there another day. You need to be reminded.
Well,
Thank you, that was fantastic.
Thanks, Rebecca, really appreciate it, that was
Thank you.
awesome.
we knew this would be a lot, and thank you.
This was great.
I just have a
We're gonna get a lot of hits on this video.
quick wrap up. For our next steps, our next SBC meeting, very exciting, y'all.
Y'all.
Gonna be showing you some floor plans. That's preliminary alternatives progress review, and then May 6th with money, with cost estimates. Community meetings.
Square footage cost us.
Square footage costs, okay.
If
Still.
I can- Just on those cost estimates, I think as we move on down the line in the next phase, we'll probably have a discussion about doing dual estimates, having the design team do an estimate and the OPM kind of separate, but at this preliminary phase, it's really square footing the numbers, and it's probably not worth spending the money to have two different estimators, so right now we have one, and that's what we're doing, but we'll,
It's the same one that we both hire, so we
Yes.
like them.
yes.
500.
They're very good.
Sorry about
April 1st, okay, our next community meetings, April 1st is the site planning option, so we'll be showing the second half of the traffic that we showed tonight. And April 11th, we'll be sharing those preliminary alternatives with the community, cost estimating April 15th to May 3rd, and then our PDP submittal, wrapping up this phase of the work on May 20th.
Are those community meetings, Jane, are those, or Lindsay, are those Killam meetings, the April 1st and the 11th again?
Yes.
They're at Killam.
Correct.
April 1st site planning options, are those like the traffic again?
Yeah, that's traffic, so that's just what
We're
we already
returning
showed
it.
tonight, yeah.
So I want you to know that we've been working with the education group leaders to show them diagrams of their program and all of the connections, and getting their feedback so that we know when we do the floor plans that everything's in the right place and it's the right connections, even vertically and all that. Before we actually show you in 2 weeks the preliminary alternatives, we are going to share it with them to make sure that the floor plans work educationally and for their building. Because why would we go to you and then they raise their hand and say that doesn't work? So we have a cart and we have a horse, and we're trying to do it the right way each time, to save you the trouble.
That's all for us.
Thanks, Judy, thanks, Blake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We just have one quick set of meeting minutes, I think that's what's next. It's pretty good to me, I don't know how the rest of you feel.
Yeah, I thought they were good.
Yeah, can I have, make a motion to accept the minutes as submitted?
Second?
Okay, roll call. So online first,
It's
motion
just-
to accept them.
It's just Kirk.
Okay, just Kirk. Okay, Kirk, how do you vote on the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Is that it?
And you?
Karen, yes. Thank you. Okay, I think I need one more motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Okay, I have to go online first. Kirk?
Yes.
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Karen, yes. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Good meeting.